Hi everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome back for another discussion today. Today we are gonna discuss switch gears from data insights to quant side of the world and tackling another most discussed segment, word problems. And welcome back, CJ, with another interesting, engaging discussion. I hope for. So yeah, with that, the format remains the same. Keep on bringing your questions, posting your questions in the chat, and we'll get as many as we could answered. And with that, I would hand it over to you, CJ.
Thank you, Harsh. Good evening, everyone. Good morning, depending upon wherever you are. Yeah, today's topic is word problems, the problem of words. So essentially, I'm not sure how many of you were a part of the last webinar we had Wednesday on data insights. It was on long two-part analysis questions. The focus there was on understanding the text, how to go about reading the text so that you can do justice to those long TPA problems. And as I shared, the problem essentially lies in just comprehending the text because of its complexity and its newness. You can't really put it into certain frameworks. The way of reading, which I talked about in the last webinar, which is cumulative assimilation, continues here. This is that way of reading, which I'm talking about, cumulative assimilation, is not really specific to long TPAs or word problems. It is not even specific to the GMAT, by the way. This is how you should read anything that you're trying to understand. Okay, so that same thought process, cumulative assimilation, I'll talk about it as we do the question, and Harsh has already shared the screens as we do these questions, and I think one or two more questions we do, you will see that in action. That will be a part of the approach that we have to word problems, because essentially the word problems are words, are pieces of text. So essentially, the way we approach any piece of text is the way we'll approach word problems. But then there are some additional specific mistakes or specific things which we'll talk about or address with respect to word problems. So let's get started with this question. Um, you can see the question on the screen. So I'll give you 2 minutes to solve this question, and then we'll discuss it. And you can share your answers. They have a chat option, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so they can. So if you can share your answer, that would be great. Okay, 15 seconds to go. Okay, let's talk about it. It says in May, Mrs. Lee's earnings, some lady's earnings, were 60% of the family's total income. So she is earning 60% of what the family is earning, so the rest of the family is earning 40% of the family's income. So this is something that I do to process the information better. I try to phrase it or look at the implication of it or look at another aspect of it in some way so that I assimilate it more deeply than just the words. Okay, it already says 60%, and I say, okay, so the rest of the family is doing 40%, I say. And then in June, okay, so it was in May, now in June, Mrs. Lee earned 20% more than in May. Okay, so we are talking in terms of percentages, but she earned 20% more than she earned in the last month. So this is, so cumulative assimilation means that when I've read the two statements, I must have understood the two statements, including the connections between them. So it's a cumulative assimilation. Okay, so I don't just read the second statement and move on. I try to see what it means in the context of the first statement. So here, I know that Mrs. Lee is earning 60%, and now she is earning 20% more than in May. So then I say, okay, let's say if 100 were the family's income and she was earning 60 in May, so now she would earn 60 plus 20%. So that would be 72. So she would earn 72 in June. Okay. Then it says if rest of the family's income was the same both months. It says the rest of the family's income. What was the rest of the family's income? So rest was 40, right? Earlier in May it was 40. Rest. And now it remains the same in June. That's what it is saying. So in June also it remains 40. Then in June, Mrs. Lee's earnings, which we know as 72, were approximately what percent of the Lee family's total income? So we are talking about June, and we need to calculate Mrs. Lee's earnings. So let's call it LE. This is what percent of total Lee family income into 100. This is what we are supposed to calculate. Mrs. Lee's earnings were what percent of the total income? This is with respect to June. Now, LE we know is 72. What is TLE? Total family income in June. So there is LE plus the remaining family income for June into 100. So that becomes 72 by 72 plus R remains the same. It says rest of the family income was the same both months into 100. So that if you do the calculations, so let's cancel by 4, then another 2. If you do the calculations, it will turn out to be around 64 or something. Yeah. So A is the answer. But more important than all of this is the fact that C is a very popular incorrect option choice in this question. Rather, I think 60 to 70% of the people who get this question wrong mark option C. C is that popular. So people are directly marking 72% as the answer. So Lee's income increased by 20%, so it becomes 72. So they're eventually marking 72%. Why would they be marking 72%? One reason is that perhaps they are reading the question as this. Everything else remaining the same. If the if part had stated that if the family's income was the same both months, so in that case, we are saying TLE, the overall total would remain the same for both months. In that case, if the Mrs. Lee's earning has increased from 60 to 72, it means the rest of the family's income must have gone down. Right? In this case, the answer would be 72%. Because it would just be 72 by total family income into 100. So you get 72% as the answer. But the original question is saying if the rest of the family's income was the same, not that the family's income was the same. So you miss just a couple of words here, and then you end up solving the entire question, doing all the calculations, but still get it wrong. Okay, so that is the point that in word problems, understanding the text is highly critical. Just missing a couple of words, you do everything, you spend all the time, but still get it wrong. Any questions? Any doubts here?
I just have one quick question. Like, let's say we identified the number 72 and 112. Like, what would be the fastest way to guess if we don't have enough time to perform the exact calculation here?
So one is that you can, of course, narrow it down to options A and B for sure, right? But
Yeah.
you have 72 by 112, right? So you know that if it was 72 by 100, then this would be 72%, right? Now the denominator is bigger than 100, so you know the number has to be smaller than 72. So you can easily rule this out. So you're down to two options, 64 and 68. Now, is there a shortcut to identify between 64? I don't know that. I can just bring it down to these two options, and then you'll have to do the calculations.
Yeah. I think one approximation which I feel could be done is like the 9 by 14 could be converted to 9 by 15, which brings it like close to 60%, which would be like a bit greater than 60%. So maybe like 64 would be an educated guess. So that's kind of fun.
Within the calculations, you can,
Yeah,
of
correct,
course,
correct.
do some playing around.
Because I feel this kind of questions become challenging when you're trying to solve it within 2 minutes, and then you need to like solve it to the point T, and then you need to do each calculation, and you end up consuming couple more minutes.
Yeah, so you would do 9 by 15, which will turn out to be 60%, and then you would say,
it would be a bit greater than 60. Yeah.
That's interesting. Because 64, yeah, I'll not be very comfortable doing that. What I would do is simply that it's 14 and it's 900 here. So I know 14 into 6 is 60 is 840 plus 60 more remaining. So this would give me 4 more. So 64. So I would actually be doing this.
If you want to be accurate, definitely.
Yeah. But yeah, you are right. 68 is still quite far
Yeah.
from 60. 64 would be a much better bet there. Yeah. Cool. Any questions we have from anyone else here? I don't know whether.
Nope.
How can I see? No
Yeah.
questions?
No. We can continue. Yeah.
Sure. Let's move on to the next one. So I'll give you 2.5 minutes to solve. As you can see, it's 2.5, so perhaps it's a little difficult one. Okay, 15 seconds to go. Okay, so let's discuss this. It says a certain clock marks every hour by striking a number of times equal to the hour. So this is the part of the statement almost everyone understands that, yeah, okay, so at 2 o'clock it will strike 2 times, at 3 o'clock it will strike 3 times, and so on. And then it says, and the time required for a stroke is exactly equal to the time interval between strokes. Almost everyone who gets this question wrong misunderstands this part. Typical understanding of this part, which I have seen, of course, there could be other interpretations also, but one common incorrect interpretation that I have seen is people think that it's saying that, oh, so basically it is just the interval between the strokes that is the time. So basically, if let's say there are 3 strokes at 3 o'clock, so there is a stroke, there is a stroke, there is a stroke. So the time required for a stroke is just this time, whatever the time is. So they just think in terms of, okay, this is the time. So let's say if the time interval between strokes is 5 seconds, then they think, okay, so this is all the time that is required. So if there are 2 strokes, it will be 10 seconds, 3 strokes, it will be 15 seconds. This is the common interpretation. And then I asked them, so are you saying that this stroke is taking 0 time because you're just thinking in terms of the intervals? And then they take a pause to understand, well, the stroke is taking 0 time. I didn't think about it. So why did they not think about it? And why did they just think that, okay, it's just the interval between? Because there are 2 problems here. One is that the statement is a little, I would say, complex or a little difficult or unfamiliar to visualize. So overall, this makes this part of the statement difficult to comprehend. Now, if something is difficult to comprehend, what should you do? Commonsensically, you should slow down and really try to understand what's happening. And when I say what's happening, it means you try to understand what it represents in real life. What's happening in a real life situation that the statement is trying to explain through words. This is what a lot of people don't do for a variety of reasons. One is, of course, they are just trying to figure out the formula or the equation to create as they read a statement. They're not thinking of what it represents in real life. They're thinking of, okay, what piece of information do I get? What equation to form? So they are in a rush to form equations to solve the question. They are not really trying to comprehend the situation. And this, of course, this mindset, this kind of approach is not limited to word problems. This is all there in CRRC everywhere. So when the questions become difficult, we stop doing justice to the question content and we try to rush. Now, what does rush even mean? Does rush mean doing things fast? No, Harsh could be doing things very fast. He may still not be rushed. Because he could be doing things fast because he's just comfortable with things. As he was saying, I think as he was sharing with me in one of our conversations, he could finish quant in 30 minutes. So he was super fast, but he was not rushed. Now, what does rush mean? Rush means that you are doing things at a pace faster than is effective to do that task. If you're doing the task because it is so easy for you, then you can be very fast and still not be rushed. But if you're doing a task at your regular pace, at a normal pace, but you are not being effective, you need to slow down to be effective, then you are rushed. So basically, in essence, what I'm trying to say is that our pace should not be fixed. It has to vary with the complexity of the situation. But for a lot of people, the pace remains fixed because they're just in a timed situation. So they are just allocating a fixed amount of time to each and everything. But this is the part, by the way, this is where a lot of people struggle. And since they move on without assimilating it deeply, they get the question wrong without even realizing that they're going wrong. So when I asked them, do you think the stroke takes 0 amount of time because you're just focusing on the interval? Then it strikes them. It says the time required for a stroke is exactly equal to. So this is equal to something else. How can this be 0? If this is 0, this interval is also 0. That doesn't make sense. And then they take a pause and think about the statement. And then they realize they haven't understood it. The point is, and it's very important, something that I do and I recommend. The point is whether you're able to understand the real life situation that the statement is trying to explain in words. It says the time required for a stroke. What would be happening? So there is a clock, it strikes, let's say 3 times. So there will be a strike, dun. So this is how I imagine. I really get into the situation. Now, getting into the situation would happen very fast if you are very familiar with this situation or if you are in generally very highly skilled. But it will not happen so fast if you're not very familiar with this situation. Then you will need to slow down and really pay attention to what exactly is being stated there. So this is the process part. So if your skills are not up to the task, you use the process to help you. So it says the time required for a stroke. So it says ton, then it comes back, and ton. So it's talking about that ton part. That is the time required for a stroke, because it's saying this is equal to the time interval between stroke. So there is a period of silence, right? Between the strokes, and then there is a ton. So for example, let's say there is a ton, then some silence, then there will be another ton, then some silence, then there will be another ton. So what we are saying is, if this is x seconds long, this is also x seconds long. So this is also x seconds long. This is what this part means. Okay, and again, more important than this, the meaning of this specific part is the process. What I'm trying to say, that you need to visualize, you need to be variable in your speed. You need to realize that you're not resisting, you're just trying to form an equation. No, first comprehend it deeply and then think about the equation or the variables. Okay, so at 6 o'clock, the time lapse between the beginning of the first stroke. So at 6 o'clock, there will be 6 tons. And it says the time lapse between the beginning of the first stroke. So we are talking from here, end of the last stroke. That's it. We are not talking about the silence before that first stroke and the silence after the first stroke. Right? This is 22 seconds. Okay. So I'll take a pause. So I know this, the time required for a stroke is x. Then this is also x, this is also x. So I can just see the pattern. There are 6 strokes. And there are how many intervals? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 intervals and 6 strokes. So overall 11x seconds is the time it's going to take if x is the amount of time it's taking for a stroke. And this is given as 22. So this gives me x equals to 2. At 12 o'clock, how many seconds elapse between the beginning of the first stroke and end of the last stroke, as we were talking about for 6 o'clock? So at 12 o'clock, there will be 12 tons, 12 strikes, and there will be 11 intervals, as we have figured out. So it will be 12x plus 11x equal to 23x, and given that x is equal to 2, so 23x will be equal to 46, which is the answer. Any questions, doubts?
I think I would like to just add one more thing here. Even I think this is easy to get carried away. The language is a bit vague, complex. Like the first time I read it, I felt that, okay, maybe something is happening for 5 times. It would be something like 5x equals to 22. But most of the times, at least what helped me was uh, believing in the numbers, at least on the quant side of things. When you see 5x equals to 22, you should feel that something is actually not right. Because those are not the numbers you want to see on GMAT when you are trying to solve questions within 2 minutes. So always try to look for kind of smart numbers. Anytime you come across such kind of equations, maybe there are high chances something somewhere have gone horribly wrong, so that you have to do kind of this bad calculations. So I had to go back again. I knew that okay, there were like 6 strokes, something was happening for 5 times. 6 plus 5 makes kind of a better number for 20 compared to 6x or 5. So even if you don't understand, sometimes numbers help you kind of come to the right conclusion. So
Yeah.
just my two
Yeah.
cents.
No, of course. And there are a variety of these kinds of cross checks or tips. Many of us use while solving questions in the exam. Yeah, so that's helpful. Yeah, I'm trying to primarily focus on how to get it right, how to just get it, understand it completely. But of course, if you don't understand it completely, there are ways to still uh, figure out. Almost, yeah, exactly. Okay, yeah, that's another mistake people make. That okay, so one strike and then uh, so and one interval. So you take it the intervals also you take six because six strikes or six intervals, and that's and that right and that's how the questions are always phrased. They're phrased very precisely. It says the beginning of the first stroke and the end. Sometimes you wonder why so complexity. It's just the strokes, man. Why the beginning of the first stroke, end of the last? Why are they just making it so sound so complex? But there is a reason. They want to be precise, right? Because you may say that okay, at the last also there was a 2 second interval, but and then there was just silence all the way for the next 1 hour, right? Who could argue that no, there was no silence for 2 seconds? There, it was just 1 hour silence. So they are very precise in stating that the beginning of the first stroke and the end of the last stroke, right? Okay, great. So I'll do one more question, and then if we have any questions from the audience regarding what problems, or we can take those up. So I'll give you 2 minutes to solve this. Okay, 15 seconds to go. Okay, let's talk about it. So we have John and Mary. They were each paid X dollars in advance. So they were each paid. So that's important. That John was also paid X, Mary was also paid X to, and they're doing a job together. John worked on the job for 10 hours. So this is what John worked for, and Mary worked 2 hours less than John. So Mary is working for 8 hours. Okay, so far they are paid the same, but they are working for different number of hours. Interesting. If Mary gave John Y dollars of her payment. Okay, so I'll stop here to understand. Okay, she is giving John Y dollars of her payment. So basically, then Mary will have X minus Y. So, okay, let me write it here. So Mary will have X minus Y. And then this would also impact John, which is something we can easily overlook. That John now would have X plus Y. So one thing that I really want to highlight here, and which would be redundant for a person like Harsh, but extremely important, could be very, very important uh, for a person who is not so great at quant, is that I have taken a pause even though I have not read the entire statement. So a common thing that I see is that people take a pause only when they've read the entire statement. And this is of course applicable to every section in which there are words, CR, RC, TPA, MSR, whatever. My point is, and this is something that I do, I need not take a pause only at the end. I can take a pause even in the middle of a sentence if I've come across a complete idea in itself and I'm trying to relate it to what I've already read. Okay, so at this stage, for example, I've read till this point and I understand, okay, so then this means that now Mary has X minus Y and John has X plus Y. Okay. This is, as I said, may not be relevant for a person great at quant, but could be extremely important or could play a very helpful role for a person who is struggling with quant, because the usual habit of reading or taking a pause only at the end of a sentence can be extremely harmful if the sentences happen to be long. If the sentences are all small, providing small bits of information, then it's fine. Then all of us can handle them in one go. But if the sentences are long, they're giving you multiple pieces of information, it's extremely helpful at times to take pauses even in the middle of the sentences. Okay, so I understand that in this case, Mary would have X minus Y and John would have X plus Y. Okay, so this, she gave John Y dollars so that they would have received the same hourly wage. Okay, so this is what Mary is giving John, and now they have the same hourly wage. What is the hourly wage for Mary? So let's call it, we can call it HM. This will be X minus Y upon 8, right? Because she's working for 8 hours. And let's call HJ. HJ now has X plus Y divided by John is working for 10 hours. So they have the same hourly wage. So we are saying that this is the same. Sorry. And again, this is another area in which a lot of people falter in making the equation right. Okay, so they're not able to create the right equation. So there are different variations possible. One common variation that I have seen is that they would think that Mary is receiving this hourly wage minus Y, and this is equal to John's hourly wage plus Y. Okay, and then when I tell them the correct thing, they just understand this. Oh, yeah, this makes sense. But then they still don't realize what is the exact problem with this, which is an extremely important thing, that whenever you make a mistake, you don't just understand the correct thing, you deeply understand what exactly is wrong with your thing. So if you have created an incorrect equation, what exactly is wrong with that equation? Why can't we create that equation? So let's spend 15 seconds to understand why this equation is wrong. This equation would mean that, so x by 8 would be the initial hourly wage. Initial, I'm saying, because if, let's say, Mary had not given John anything, that would be the initial hourly wage of Mary. Minus y would mean that from the hourly wage of Mary, we are subtracting y. So if Mary is working for 8 hours, for every hour, y is being subtracted out of her wage. But that is not the case here. Mary is just giving y dollars to John for once, not out of every hour of her wage. Right? So that is the reason this is wrong. We have to subtract y from x, not from x by 8. So this is the equation that we land up with. So this is the same as we are given, that they receive the same hourly wage eventually. So now we equate them. So 10x minus 10y is equal to 8x plus 8y. So then we get 2x is equal to 18y. So x is equal to 9y. What was the dollar amount that John was paid in advance? So yeah, so x is equal to 9y is what we are looking for. Okay, in general, yeah, I would postpone these. I would do these calculations after reading the question, but I would create this equation after reading this part. I would not wait to create even this equation before I read the question. Okay, because as I said, as I read, I assimilate it, and this essentially is an equation that they receive the same hourly ones. So I will be having this equation, and then when I read the question, I realize that I just need to calculate x in terms of y. So I would just solve it to get x equal to 9y. Yeah. Any questions? Any doubts here? Not very relevant for you, Harsh.
I think I did it the other way around. I think the if we assume the hourly rate to something like z, we can maybe simplify the equations a bit. Like if we know x minus y equals to 8z and x plus y equals to 10z, you just add both the equations and you get like x equals to 9z and y equals to z. So that kind of solves it. It removes the complexity on the other side of things, which was difficult for me to understand even when you wrote it like x by 8 minus y. It would have been difficult for me to form that equation if that was something which was asked in the first place. So then that's, but yeah, I think yeah, sometimes uh, assuming variables for the right thing which we are solving sometimes simplifies the way we can make the equation. So
Yeah. So just one other thing that I would add here. At the end, a lot of times I have a habit of cross-checking my answer. So so this answer, for example, the way I would cross-check is, oh, x equal to 9y. So essentially, John was paid 9y, Mary was paid 9y. So if Mary transfers y, John, John would have 10 and Mary would have 8y. So yeah, so both of them will have hourly wage of y. So that makes sense. So 9y is correct. So this is the cross check that I'll have at the end.
And I would
Do
say
you,
this is super important, like to cross check lot many times because it's easy to
oh,
get carried away, feeling that okay, we might have done it the right thing. And surprisingly, when you get your scorecard and you realize, okay, I did everything right and what went wrong, kind of a thing. So it's always good if you have time to cross check, verify, just
uh,
be sure that at least you don't make silly mistakes on the calculation part, at least for the easy and medium questions.
yeah, I typically cross check,
Yeah.
and I wonder that could be the reason I always take almost all of my time. But I'm very yeah, I'm very particular about. Yeah, of course, it happens rarely that I make a mistake, but there are times that you make some
True.
weird mistake and then you end up catching that.
Yep. With that,
Cool.
we'll open the forum to questions. Feel free to post them in the chat. We'll try to take as many as we could. And yeah, while we wait, I can kickstart. One question which I was always worried about while trying to solve word problems was that is there any recurring pattern when we try to solve multiple word problems which CJ you might have observed while you were uh, teaching or even in the mix of like solving questions during your prep journey? Is there kind of a limit to these recurring patterns? And if so, like how many questions should one practice to become familiar with most of the common templates?
So there are patterns everywhere, uh, but at the same time, right now, I think science acknowledges that every leaf is different. But at the same time, differences always exist at the surface level. But if you go deep, then you realize a lot of things are same. Essentially,
Yep.
everything is coming from the soil, right? So it depends on how in depth your analysis and your learning is. If you are analyzing things deeply, then you will start seeing patterns. If you remain at the surface level, it will seem that everything is new. And the deeper you go, the more you start seeing similarities across questions, not even within a concept, across concepts also. So yeah, of course,
Yeah.
there are always.
And what about the number of questions? Like, how many would you recommend? Is it
So
500,000
I,
or is it kind of just a number
so
which doesn't matter? It's more around
equation,
the concept which someone should focus on.
yeah. So there is an equation that I use, which is that it is the learning that counts. Now, learning is the number of questions multiplied by the amount of learning per question.
Okay.
So if you are learning a lot from every question, you would require less questions to get the same amount of learning. If you are doing things, not analyzing your mistakes properly, not understanding things deeply, then you would probably solve even thousands of questions without learning much. So it depends entirely on how much you are learning from every single question that you're doing. For example, on GMAT Club, and I think one of your questions is around. So on GMAT Club, a lot of times there are multiple ways to solve the same question, right? You can use the options, you can use algebra, you can use reasoning, uh, and sometimes even within reasoning also you can approach it from two different angles. Now, are you trying to understand all of this as you do one question, or are you just trying to solve one question one way and then move on? Okay. The point is, the question is just an opportunity to learn, right? For example, you were saying one of the questions was that which method should we use in a particular question. It depends entirely on which one is most comfortable in that question. In certain questions, using options could be the quickest way. In some other questions, if you don't do algebra, you won't get to the answer. In some questions, if you do algebra, you will spend 5 minutes, whereas you could solve the same question using reasoning in 1.5 minutes. So there are different tools that work in different situations. in an effective way. Now, if you have just one tool in your toolbox, then naturally every time you'll have to use it. But if over a period of time, over a period of your practice, you have built proficiency in multiple tools. Now, the question that you're looking at, you can pick and choose. Okay, this tool works better in this question. So the practice is an opportunity to build proficiency. So ideally, if you're looking at a question, you should, during practice, solve it in multiple ways, all the ways in which it can be solved. Then over a period of time, you'll realize that now you're becoming proficient in all the ways. So now you can pick and choose which way works the best in a particular question.
Very well put, and I would say I couldn't put it in a much better way. So that has been even one of my recommendations around improving in quant. Always know more than one way to solve a question, because if you just know one particular technique and if that doesn't work during your test, you can mess up all the remaining questions which are yet in the pipeline. So always have that in your arsenal and be quick to understand if the existing approach which you are trying it's not working. Then what's the second approach which you can even use if you have time left in the end. But if you keep on kind of going through the same solution again and again, you might not be able to spot the mistake you're making. So this is super important for anyone kind of aiming for a good quant score. Always try to solve questions using multiple ways, not just for learning, but at the same point in time having kind of multiple uh, weapons in your arsenal when the battle comes up. So yeah.
Yeah, I generally don't visualize it in terms of pattern.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
So we have one question from Rohan. Okay, so the method which we quickly discussed around using a variable z in the question which
I can explain it. I think
we
we don't have
discussed last. Yeah, go ahead.
might be difficult for you. So what I think, and you can correct me if I got it wrong. So basically,
Yep.
what Harsh was saying was that when it talks about Mary gave John $Y so that they would have received the same hourly wage, he assumed that this hourly wage would be Z. And then if you say that this same hourly wage is Z, then John essentially got 10Z because he worked for 10 hours, and Mary got 8Z. Now, John has X plus Y because, right, Y, Mary gave it to John, and Mary has X minus Y. So these are the two equations that Hirsch would form, right? Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Right? And then he would just calculate the value of X in terms of Y using this.
Perfect.
Does that sort of answer what you were asking, Rohan?
I hope so. So another thing what I've observed happen lot many times when we are trying to solve word problems is that we start with an approach and midway through we realize that our setup was not correct or it was not accurate. And what do we do in such scenarios now? Like, even though we know kind of a second approach, do we even jump on the second one or do we skip the question and then maybe if time permits we come back later?
It's essentially a question of sunk cost. The time that you have spent does not matter, right? The point is now how much time would you need to solve that question? If you think you can solve it in the next 2 minutes, that's fine. If you think, okay, now I'm going to take 4 more minutes on this, or I don't have an idea how much time I'm going to take, then it may make sense to skip that question or just randomly mark and move on. So it is the time that you have wasted already on it does not matter. The point is, from this point onwards, how much time do you need to spend to get it right?
Perfect. And the reason why this happens lot many times is that because people are not able to convert the text to write equations or the math which is required for it. So what would be your advice, recommendation on how do students improve those kind of techniques, strategies when they are doing their practice sessions of word problems?
Yeah. So the reason is that you were not able to form the correct equation You perhaps did not understand the text correctly. Why did you not understand the text correctly? Uh, there could be patterns. One is, of course, there could be patterns in your misunderstanding that you repeatedly sort of misunderstand certain structures. Or it could be that, as a lot of people realize, it was just rush. Now, in case of rush, uh, the point is to understand that what is the solution to rush. The solution to rush, it's twofold. One is that to realize that are there specific kind of scenarios in which you are rushing. Again, as I said, rush just means that you're not giving the time that it needs. Perhaps you're giving it the same time that you're giving to other sentences also. Rush doesn't mean that you're giving it less time. Rush just means you're not giving it the time it needs from you. Okay, so if it is difficult, the chances are you will rush. It's not that now you're giving it less time. By the way, that also happens. I had a student uh, in which we observed this pattern that when he would come across a difficult option, he would move fast more quickly. Why? Because he would get tensed up, stressed within, oh, I've come across something difficult. So his hunch, his instinct would be to just quickly move on to something more comfortable. He was unaware of it even after spending 1.5 years. So when we were doing it, sort of going through what was going on in his mind, I was solving the question. Then we came across this, that's what his tendency is. Then he realized, okay, this tendency also holds for quants, ERRC across. So it could be that, of course, this could also be happening to you. But a general, more common thing is that you spend the same amount of time on everything. So on more difficult things, if you're spending the same amount of time, you're not doing them justice. So the point is to realize how you can become aware that something difficult has come now. Can you identify those structures as you solve the questions? You need to build that awareness. Without that awareness, I don't know any way out. Okay, because this is, and I'm not sure whether you have observed this, but this is something that I observed in build in high scorers, and something that I observe in myself also. I read very consciously. I'm constantly aware how I feel about this piece of text, whether I'm very comfortable or I'm not very comfortable. So if I'm not very comfortable, I know that I have to slow down and really do justice to it.
Yep, well said. We can take one more question if any. But as we were having discussions around high scorers, what's kind of generally we see a lot of text coming in, correct, for quants, and those are the questions which are generally more tripping for kind of those 85 plus scorers. Any general advices, tips around like how do you tackle stress pressure scenarios when you are dealing with more dense passages in on the tougher end of the word problems? Is the advice same to stay calm, controlled, and read the passage, or would you recommend any specific strategies in those scenarios?
But stay calm is, is a junk advice. Everybody knows it. Uh, I think what I would add here is a common misconception. I'm not sure how prevalent that is. That you have to take 2 minutes on every question. 2 minutes is the average amount of time, or whatever 1 minute 50 seconds, whatever the time is the average amount of time. You would take very different amounts of time on different question. Even if you look at my analytics, or perhaps your analytics also, right? On some questions we take just 45 seconds to 1 minute, and another question I would take 4 minutes. Right, so it's not about taking 2 minutes on every question. So if some question demands is challenging for me, it could be not, may not be challenging for somebody else, but if it is challenging for me, the only choice I have is to spend more time and do justice to it, or to rush and be at constant risk of getting it wrong.
And I can definitely relate. I think 2 minutes is just kind of an average time theoretically, but it never works in real time. So most probably the way you attempt it, you need to save some time so that you can get more time on those difficult questions. And
Yeah.
most probably kind of double check those questions because those would be more time consuming, more challenging, so that you end up on the right side of the equation most of the time. So definitely a good piece of advice there.
And something related to this is also that a lot of people think that, oh, I'm now hitting 90-95% accuracy on medium questions, so now I can move to hard, medium is done. No, what kind of time are you hitting? You can't hit 2 minutes per question on a medium question and really aim to get a 90 plus percent time, right? Because you'd be seeing hard questions and you'd be needing more time on hard questions. If you need 2 minutes on medium question, then you don't have time left for hard questions, right? So your
Okay.
time per question also be in that range that okay, for medium questions I can perhaps do them within 1 to 1.5 minutes or whatever the time is. You need to save time for hard and very hard questions.
Cool. That brings up to the end of our discussion today. Thank you guys for joining. Thanks, CJ, for another valuable, insightful session. And yeah, we got to learn lot many different new things. I hope it was helpful for everyone who joined. And yeah, we'll see you again in the next one coming up. So yeah, have a good day then.
Thank you. Have a good
Yeah,
day. Bye
see you then.
bye.
Bye.